John sat on a long bench in the garden, watching his mother pick rosy apples from the trees and put them in a basket. He had no intention of helping her, just being here because he needed to talk to his mother. She knew what the conversation would be about and started it first. After all, she still hoped he would change his mind and she wouldn't have to take on such responsibility. She had every right to refuse him because at his age, she had already spent so much time taking care of others that she wanted a few years to live for herself, even before her own death. He himself couldn't bring himself to speak to her first. John stumbled over his words. He kept starting conversations about something else because he simply couldn't talk about why he came. He wanted to, at least verbally, first appease his mother so she would give in. Deep down, he knew she would refuse him because she had repeatedly said she wouldn't take responsibility for what he had done. Yes, moreover, in recent years, his mother had changed so much that he could no longer rely on her help and support in such matters. When he finally decided to speak to her, she had finished her work and, taking both baskets in her hands, went towards the house. John, still talking about trivial matters, followed her like a calf. "Mom, remember from childhood Dad always told you that raising children should be a woman's job. Remember, Dad always told you that you should take care of the children," the man said, clearly determined to start the conversation with accusations, not realizing that it was not the best tactic. "I remember that. And while I was taking care of the children, your father was drinking, and he was also running to the neighbor across the street, who was always ready to take him in. That's what's called the right division of responsibilities," she said with a wry smile. "I know why you came, and I'm not going to indulge you. You made children, so now deal with them yourself. I won't take the girl, do as you please with her. Mom, you don't understand, she's an extra mouth to feed. I'm not going to feed her either. After Stephanie died, I feel like a wolf in that wolf cub, circling around and around, but it's no use. I feel like some kind of toy, not in control of myself. Where should I take the girl? After my wife's funeral, just take her to an orphanage. Take the girl in, what's the big deal? Let her help you around the house or let her do all the housework. Come up with something for her. She's not so little that you have to baby her," the man said, shrugging. But his mother, as if not listening, shook her head and rolled her eyes, because she simply didn't want to take the girl in and take care of her. On the one hand, she understood that the girl would have a sad fate if she didn't take her in. But on the other hand, she had already spent too much time on other people. Now she wanted to do only what she wanted. The woman refused her son for the last time and insisted that he not start a conversation with her again. John was so angry at his mother's decision that he immediately flew out of the yard, slamming the door. He was angry because he didn't understand how his own mother could refuse him such simple help. Although he himself didn't understand what he was asking for, really. He wanted to rid himself of responsibility. From the outside, it was perfectly visible, but he convinced himself that he just wanted to get rid of an extra mouth because he couldn't support himself and her. Now there was only one option left, to send her to an orphanage because he wasn't going to deal with her anymore. There were too many problems with this girl. Yes, and besides, he already spent too much time at work and wanted to relax in the evening. Lie down all day, not deal with the child. Yes, if she knew how to do something around the house, he would leave her as a servant. She was just learning everything, even though she took care of herself. But she wasn't mature enough to take on such responsibility. The girl, who was just starting to do everything on her own, especially after her mother died, wasn't good enough to stay as the mistress of the house. She was just learning to cook, clean well. But it wasn't enough for him to spend food on her. Another argument in favor of sending her to an orphanage was that she was taking money from him. Not directly, but he had to spend it on school, clothes, stationery, and something else. He wanted to live only on benefits and not worry about anything else. He would quit his job. But it was impossible to support two people on benefits. He didn't even entertain the thought that his mother had already calculated his moves. But in fact, his mother had long suspected that this last factor was decisive for her son. On that day, John never made it home. He stopped at his friend's gate, who was just pruning and stacking grapes to prepare it for winter. Seeing John, he immediately got off the ladder, went to the gate, taking off his thick gloves. He shook his friend's hand firmly and then led him into the yard. The friend smiled, understanding how this meeting would end. His friend's wife came out onto the street, saw all this company, and immediately understood how it would all end. She rolled her eyes, threw up her hands, and went into the house so as not to see how her husband and the neighbor she hated would arrange another drinking spree. She knew that John would then go home, recounting all the angles. And her husband would stay at home to arrange a drunken scandal. Or fall asleep on the threshold on the carpet. She was sick of it all, but she didn't see a way out of this family. Sometimes she even envied John's late wife because she had already suffered with her fate. I don't know what to do with this damn girl. She's already got on my nerves while my wife was still alive. And now, I don't know where to put her. I wanted to palm her off to my mother, but my mother dug in like a ram at new gates and said she wouldn't take any girl. She says if I bring her to the yard, she'll just leave her there. I know my mother. She'll even file a complaint against me. John complained to his friend. I don't know why you're showing off. Would have sent the girl to the orphanage and not worried. Do you think we pay taxes for nothing on these orphanages? If you don't want to deal with her, don't. As if you owe her anything. Women should raise children, it's not a man's duty. Or do you want to retrain as a nanny? His old friend smirked. John proudly lifted his head. He wouldn't allow his friend to mock him. He wanted the unnecessary reasons for such mockery to disappear. He didn't want to deal with the girl, but even more so, he didn't want everyone laughing at him. He was so angry that he slammed his fist on the table, making their glasses tremble. His friend burst into laughter because they were both already so drunk that they were thinking poorly. When John returned home that day, he no longer understood anything. He collapsed on the long couch, not even suspecting that he had seriously frightened the girl, who locked herself in her room and blocked the door with a cupboard so that her drunken father couldn't get to her. The next morning, she quietly emerged from her room and went to make breakfast. Her face was tear-stained because she still missed her mother terribly. It was bitterly painful for her to realize that she now had to live with this man who couldn't behave properly. After her mother's death, he constantly drank, and there was not a single evening when he came home in a normal state. He was either heavily drunk, or intoxicated, or looked as if he had taken those white pills from somewhere that made him unlike himself. All of this made the girl so distressed that she didn't know where to turn. Sometimes she thought about running away, but then realized that it was all pointless. In the end, there was nowhere to run. And if she ran to her grandmother's, she simply wouldn't be accepted. She had already overheard her father's conversation with her grandmother, and the grandmother made it quite clear that she didn't want to see the girl. Little Lily understood that she was simply not needed in this world. All she did was clean, cook, and go to school. Every day after school, she visited the cemetery to sit by her mother's grave because only her mother loved her. And only she was ready to take her in. And every time little Lily sat on the bench, wiped away her tears, looking at her mother's grave, realizing that she would never see her again. And every time she had to leave there, she felt it was terribly difficult to go back home. Even the cemetery, where it had always been scary before, was now much calmer than home. She didn't even suspect what destiny had in store for her. At that very moment, while she was at school, her father went to the social services, trying to drown out the smell of alcohol with anything he could find. Naturally, the social workers had seen such people here in the village dozens of times. The smell of alcohol clearly didn't scare them. But as soon as this man entered the room, a stout woman immediately understood that they would be discussing a child whom the man didn't want to raise. "I wanted to ask if it's possible to place the girl in an orphanage," the man said, twisting his cap in his hands. "The mother died, and don't know how to raise her. I'm a man. Can I raise a girl?" "Yes, and I earn little. So, she'll have a roof over her head and food. So, everything will be fine. I just don't know how to do it right. Bring the girl to us, or I can come to you to take her. Don't worry, I see such situations here all the time. Let's fill out the application for your voluntary abandonment of the child now. Just remember that you will lose all benefits and allowances. Because you will no longer be a single father, nor will you be in any other categories you're currently entitled to," the stout woman warned him, already taking out papers from a folder. She was still looking at the papers and didn't see how the man's face twisted. He looked her up and down, completely not understanding what she meant. Actually, he planned to quit his job and live on these benefits. Now she says that if he gives up the child to an orphanage, he will lose all these benefits. Suddenly, for the first time, he thought about what exactly his benefits were made up of. He was scared that if he got rid of the child, he would have to continue working at the factory. He was stunned and didn't manage to say anything, and then he saw her raise her eyes to him. She saw his frightened face, and he didn't say anything, just got up and left. The stout woman put her hand to her face, shook her head negatively, understanding that this man refused to give up the child so that she could live in better conditions, just so that he could continue receiving benefits. She constantly saw such situations regardless of whether the child grew up in a complete family or not. She again put the papers back in the folder and remained sitting, thinking that such a situation was not unique. That it won't be a year before some other mothers or fathers come back again, who will change their minds about giving up the child to an orphanage as soon as they find out that they will lose benefits or some additional payments. John returned home in a foul mood. Naturally, the girl bore the brunt of his anger, receiving another slap and sitting on the floor in tears, afraid to utter a word. He paced the room angrily, unsure of what to do with the girl he clearly didn't want to support. His already sour mood was exacerbated by his dwindling finances and his desire for a drink. He glanced at the girl, who sat on the floor, and immediately thought he could not only pass the time but also get rid of her. So much so that no one would even know where she had gone. And while local social workers would rush to search for her, he would continue to receive benefits for several more years. "All right, stop crying, get ready. We'll go to the woods together, maybe gather some mushrooms, maybe find some berries," John said, lifting the girl, embracing her ribs with both hands. She was so thin that he himself was surprised. When she finally wiped away her tears and changed her clothes, he walked out with her into the yard. It was getting dark outside, but not enough to be completely dark. Twilight would set in within an hour, and by that time, he would want to be back home, not trudging through the woods in the dark. The forest was fairly sparse and posed no danger. The hunters had made sure that there were no wild animals left. Any creatures that didn't want to end up as trophies on a hunter's floor had retreated deep into the woods, where it was impassable for humans. John walked ahead, the girl trailed behind him. She held a small basket in her hands, stopping every now and then to cut mushrooms with a small knife. By the time they reached the cliff, she had already filled half the basket, much to John's satisfaction. When he got rid of the girl, he would have a basket of mushrooms. On the way back, he could gather some more. It didn't seem strange to him that at this moment, when he was contemplating the death of a child, he was more concerned with preparing mushrooms. You know, your mother was very stubborn. But I still loved her because she was always ready to lend me a helping hand. She loved me, she believed in me, and I knew I could always rely on her. I always thought you would grow up just like her. But you turned out to be a wimp. I thought that when she died, you would take care of the house. But all you do is whine," John said rather sharply. The girl was completely taken aback by this conversation because she thought they had come here to make amends, to simply talk in the lap of nature. But apparently, her father decided to have another moralizing conversation. They reached the edge of the cliff. The girl looked ahead. She felt her foot slip. She immediately regained her footing. The entire cliff consisted of red clay, which kept crumbling. And when it got wet, it became very slippery. The girl looked ahead, where the huge black forest spread out, now illuminated by the sun. The red rays illuminated the treetops, painting them in peculiar shades. She involuntarily smiled, watching such beauty. But suddenly she felt him grab her shoulders and push her forward. She felt the slippery red clay literally slip from under her feet and how she fell down. Realizing that all she would see for the last time was her father's grinning face, who pushed her off the cliff to get rid of an extra mouth. He then immediately turned back, not wanting to see her, and went down, holding the basket where the girl, who in his opinion was no longer alive, collected mushrooms. He descended down the slope, carefully choosing his path. Fine rain began to fall, the clay gradually becoming more slippery. Soon he descended back onto the forest path, where the ground was more stable. And he was already thinking about coming home right now, frying mushrooms, and then pouring himself some moonshine, enjoying his time alone, celebrating a brilliant idea. When he returned home in the dark, he didn't even expect to see a car parked nearby. The dark cherry car, shining in the last rays of the setting sun, looked very expensive. The car, which caught the last rays of the sun, belonged to his late wife's sister. John remembered this car because it was this woman who stood at his late wife's grave and cried, constantly saying that someday she would take revenge on whoever put her in the grave. They constantly argued, and Alice constantly provoked her sister to divorce. And now, when his wife was no longer alive, John didn't even suspect why this woman had come here now. She got out of the car, still as beautiful, slim, and tall as she was at the funeral. He involuntarily admired her, thinking that if his wife had been so beautiful, he wouldn't have had to poison her to make her die as soon as possible. "John, I came here not to argue, if you agree to my terms. I came to take the girl with me. If you're only concerned about money, then get your benefits or I'll pay you child support." "Just let her stay with me," Alice said, standing by her car. He saw that she was holding something in her hand, apparently afraid that he would rush at her. But right now, he was only thinking that he probably shouldn't have pushed the girl off the cliff. Not suspecting that Alice would come and agree to take her away. He was so shocked by her behavior that he got angry. He was angry that she hadn't told him about her arrival earlier, that she hadn't expressed her desire to take the girl earlier. "Get out of here. I said, get out of here. Before I smash your car. So I don't see you here. Do you think I'll just give you the girl like that? She's my daughter, I'll raise her myself," John exclaimed sharply. "Let me talk to her, let her decide for herself who she wants to be with. Where is she now? Why is the house in darkness? And where the hell are you wandering?" she said, looking him up and down. Her attention was caught by the fact that there was bright red clay on his boots, which had stuck to the sole and completely covered the front of his old boots. He just cursed at her and then suddenly froze. So, if you come here again, I'll beat you first, bury you next to your little sister, and then throw the girl somewhere. I've said it all. So, get out of here. Look, here comes Mother Teresa. She came to take the girl. Yes, the girl doesn't even know you. Auntie is called. And you're her godmother too? Well, get out of here before I paint your car with your own forehead. John said maliciously. She didn't expect such a reaction. She had hoped that he would offer her some money, and she would give him that money. Yes, she was ready to pay him a certain amount every month to get the girl back, who clearly wasn't safe with this man. Alice couldn't come immediately because right after the funeral she had to go abroad to finish all her business with the business. And now she stood right in front of him and was afraid that the angry man would rush at her to really take revenge on her for some non-existent offense. She stepped back, but immediately returned to her original position, preparing to fight back if he rushed at her. But John didn't touch her. He entered the gate, then disappeared into the house, where the light just came on. Alice felt that something had happened, but couldn't explain to herself why she felt such an unpleasant sensation in her chest. "Woman, come here," said the old woman, coming out of the gate. The creak from this gate was so high-pitched and unpleasant that Alice involuntarily grimaced. She approached the old woman, and she, barely moving her fingers, hinted that she was ready to share information if Alice handed her a few banknotes. Without hesitation, she took out several large bills from her wallet and handed them to the old woman. And she was stunned by such a sum and immediately began to speak. "A few hours ago, he took the girl somewhere into the woods. I don't know what he did to her there. He only returned without the girl. I know he tried to bribe her mother first. I even heard this conversation with my own ears. And then he went to social services, but why, I don't know," said the old woman. Alice froze in place. She suddenly realized what nightmare could have happened a few hours ago. But she couldn't get over the shock. When she felt the old woman put some device into her hand, she involuntarily looked at it. It was a huge flashlight, which she had never even seen before. "You gave me so much money that I don't mind this damn flashlight. It's my husband's flashlight, who used to work as a forester. It will light up the whole forest for you at once. Run. If there's a chance to save the girl, you'll save her," said the old woman. Alice seemed to wake up after her words, quickly got into the car, and stepped on the gas. She flew through the darkness that thickened around her car, which now looked just as gray and unremarkable as everything around. The dark cherry car stopped near the forest. When Alice got out of the car, she immediately felt lost. She didn't know how to get into the forest, how to save the girl, if it was still possible at all. She remembered the way to that very cliff, where there was red clay. And suddenly she thought she could find this path by memory, and now. She and her sister used to walk here very often in childhood, and she must have memorized this path, at least mechanically, just by walking along the trail. She turned on the flashlight and was surprised at how far it shone ahead. Alice took out the stun gun, which she always took with her just in case she encountered wild animals. Although, from childhood, she remembered that no wild animals lived here. She walked to the very edge of the cliff and suddenly froze. "Lily," Alice said quietly, without hope of an answer. A terrifying ringing silence hung over her. But then, somewhere in the distance, a light moan was heard. And Alice, leaning against the edge, shone down. She was terribly afraid of heights and couldn't just stand on the edge of the cliff, which could collapse at any moment. She lay down, pointing the flashlight down where she saw the silhouette of the girl. "Lily, it's me, Alice. Your aunt. Did you break anything? Do you feel your hands and feet?" Alice asked, trying to speak slowly and clearly. "No, but I'm stuck in the branches. I can't get out," the girl said and immediately started crying. "I can't get out," she repeated, quieter this time. There was only despair in her voice. Alice, overcoming her own fear, slowly began to descend the cliff, carefully looking for a place to step on. She regretted not bringing a rope. Although, a rope could have been a great help even to this huge flashlight. But it turned out that descending was not so difficult. Apparently, fishermen and hunters often walked here and had already trodden a path down the more or less solid surface. But it was still slippery here. Every time Alice's foot slipped, she involuntarily screamed. She kept talking to the girl as she descended, making sure she responded. When Alice was almost at the bottom of the cliff, she climbed up a tree. She untangled the girl, who was literally caught in the branches and wilted leaves. Somehow she fell onto those branches and emerged without visible injuries. Her whole body was covered in small scratches, but it didn't matter. Alice helped the girl climb up the cliff, and she walked on shaky legs along the same path. They didn't realize how quickly they returned to the car. Alice laid the girl on the back seat, wrapped her in a blanket that was always in her car, and then sat behind the wheel. She rested her face on the steering wheel, covering it with her palms, and started crying. She had experienced so much fear while descending the cliff, while running here, that she couldn't believe it was all behind her now. Barely calming down, she immediately pressed the accelerator to the floor, and the car, lifting up wet earth, sharply turned around, leaving behind a fairly deep rut. She drove onto the road and headed home, where she truly felt safe. Throughout the journey, Alice tried to talk to the girl to calm her down. But little Lily fell asleep quite quickly, apparently completely exhausted from fear and the horror she had experienced. It's been over 8 years since he took his stepdaughter to the cliff and pushed her down to get rid of an extra mouth. Since then, he completely forgot about the girl and continued to receive welfare payments for her, enjoying the fact that he had made the best decision in his life. He provided for himself for many years, but now that she legally turned 18, most of his payments stopped. John took it hard when he found out that he now had practically no money left, that he had completely plummeted into the abyss. He indulged in gambling, alcohol, and immersed himself even more in all his harmful habits, which turned him into an animal. And now he sat at the table in his house, heavily drinking and playing cards with friends. Lost the last money. You know what? I bet my house. If we're going to play, let's play big. If I win this hand now, I'll get all the money on the table. And if I lose, so be it, John said, pounding his fist on the table. But then one of his friends laughed loudly, leaning back on the creaky chair. John felt the anger building up inside him. He clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. How can you play with a house that doesn't belong to you? The friend laughed again, unable to contain himself. The friend saw that John wasn't even aware of the new decree that his friend had seen much earlier. You don't know? Didn't anyone call you? Who was supposed to call me? What do you mean the house doesn't belong to me? Are you sure you're not mistaken? Or do you think you have enough teeth? John reacted sharply, still not understanding what his friend meant. But anger was already starting to boil inside him, and he felt that tonight would end in another fight. 2 days ago, I was at work and saw documents that came from the city. And it's written in black and white there that the house no longer belongs to you, that it has a new owner. I didn't look closely, but I understood that somehow everything passed through inheritance rights, the friend said, shrugging his shoulders. But his laughter was blown away by the wind. Call yourself, or better yet, go yourself and find out what's going on. But I won't take your bet, because then I won't get the house, the friend said. When they all dispersed, John was left in complete shock. The next day, as soon as he woke up after another binge, he went to the local office to find out what had happened to the house. He knew that the house belonged to him and couldn't understand who dared to encroach on his property. He was already preparing for a scandal, realizing that this was the only way to get to the truth. He couldn't find any other way than to prove the truth with his fists. But when he entered, he found himself in a long line, which only made him angrier. By the time his turn came, he had already deflated and just wanted to know the truth without resorting to fists. But when he entered the room and saw his stepdaughter, he was simply stunned. He was shocked to see who was claiming his house. He fell to his knees, begging her for forgiveness, not understanding what he had really done. He was giving some absurd reasons why he had treated her like that, and she understood that it wasn't worth listening to him. Everything he said was dictated only by his fear that this truth would soon come to light and he would be jailed. Lily, who remembered her stepfather perfectly, was surprised at how far he had fallen. He looked simply soaked. All his bad habits had affected his appearance, leaving their mark. She didn't say a word to him when Alice appeared in the room as well. Lily felt completely safe. "Why did you come this time? Do you want to push her off the cliff again to keep getting benefits without spending money on an extra mouth?" Alice asked, literally shielding the girl. "Be thankful she didn't file a complaint against you. Although I insisted on it. Get out of here for good. And vacate the house, because you have no right to it now. And before you inherit, you could at least read the whole will. Then you would have known that everything would go to Lily as soon as she turns 18. Well, where will I live then?" John objected. "She can't just throw me out onto the street, can she? I'm her stepfather, I took care of her. And her mother loved me. She can't just kick me out like that. Maybe she will, and she'll definitely do it. So go home, pack up your stuff, until we show up there together with the police. If I see you near Lily again, I'll personally skin you alive and hang your hide on the fence. So that scum like you won't dare again." Alice sharply responded, still shielding the girl. She looked like an enraged bear defending her cub. She wasn't going to back down an inch, even if he rose and lunged at her. But she was confident she could hold her ground. Like Lily, she noticed how much John had changed since the last time she saw him. Now he couldn't possibly attack her, because he couldn't even stand steadily on his feet anymore. Shaking hands and legs betrayed him as a drunkard who was incapable of defending his position as before. When he left the office, everyone felt relieved. Lily, along with the notary, began sorting through the documents again. Alice now stood by the door, expecting John to barge in again. And then she would grab him by the collar and throw him out of the office. She didn't expect him to show up here, especially after everything he had done. She repeatedly urged Lily not to forgive her stepfather, as some things were simply unforgivable. All the documents were processed, and as soon as Lily became the rightful owner of the house, she put it up for sale. The enormous house, which had lost all its charm over the years, still attracted attention from those wanting to move to the countryside. Buyers were quickly found, and Lily sold the house without much negotiation, acquiring funds in return. She stood by the gate, gazing at the house where she had once been happy with her mother and father before her stepfather entered her life. She suddenly thought about how much her life had changed since then. She couldn't believe she had come so close to death on that cliff, saved only by hitting her back against a ledge, which threw her towards a tall tree. She still bore scars on her body from those scratches, which turned out to be much deeper upon inspection. But these scars only reminded her once again that she couldn't trust anyone. She would forever be grateful to Alice for saving her, sheltering her for so many years, providing her with a good education, and giving her a normal outlook on life. As a farewell, Lily entered the cemetery one last time, realizing that she probably wouldn't return here in the coming years. She laid her mother's favorite red roses on the grave, sat on the bench, and looked at the photograph she considered the most beautiful. She terribly missed her mother, still unable to convince herself that she was gone. In her mind, it still seemed like her mom had just gone away, believing that someday she would return. "I miss you so much," Lily said, feeling a lump in her throat. "Don't think I blame you for anything. I remember how distraught you were after Dad's death and how you ended up with the wrong person in your life. I don't blame you. I don't hold you accountable for anything. I hope you finally found peace wherever you are." Lily got up from the bench and walked towards the cemetery gate, thinking that she didn't blame her mother anymore, at least not now that she was older and could understand her decisions. She really missed her and thought that when she left for good, she would miss her mother the most, not the house, not her stepfather, and not the entire village where no one could help her, even when they saw her stepfather tormenting her. Lily bid farewell to her mother, got into Alice's car, and they left this village forever, never to return. Ahead of Lily lay higher education, a life full of opportunities, and the strong shoulder of her aunt, who had become a second mother to her. Lily wiped away a tear, mentally said her final goodbye to her mother, and never looked back at the wrought iron gates that forever closed behind her late mother.